Is it again? Direct realism is the natural starting point for many theories of perception. Common sense suggests that physical objects exist independently of our minds.
A little reflection suggests that what we perceive isn't quite the same as what is out there. So what we perceive in all these cases isn't the world as it is, but we are still perceiving the world in some way.
First, the thumb and the moon. Does your thumb look really bigger than the moon? First, the thumb and the moon. Does your thumb really look bigger than the moon? Or is it rather the moon? First, the thumb and the moon. Does your thumb really look bigger than the moon? Or is it rather that the moon looks further away? The way our visual system works, it is difficult to separate properties of size from properties of distance. How big something looks in the usual sense of that phrase depends on how far away it looks.
We might object that we do not experience distance, rather the object looks small, but because we know about distance and size, we judge it to be large and far away. When we don't know how large something is, we can sometimes wrongly judge it to be small and close, rather than large and distant, or vice versa. This shows that we don't experience distance directly, and there is a distinction between how big it is, it seems, and how big it is. To account for this, we need sense data.
When we look at this straw half submerged in water, we see a bent straw, but the straw isn't bent, so what is? We see something bent, but it isn't the straw, so it must be a sense datum. We have a mental image of a bent straw. The straw in the image is bent, but that means we don't see the real straw directly. We see it indirectly via sense data. So direct realism is false, and representative realism must be right.
In the case of hallucinations, there is no physical object that looks a certain way, because there is no physical object at all. However, following the lead of distinctionists, all direct... In the case of hallucinations, there is no physical object that looks... In the case of hallucinations, there is no physical object that looks a certain way, because there is no... In the case of hallucinations, there is no physical object that looks a certain way, because there is no physical object at all. However, following the lead of distinctionists, all direct realists argue that we can't generalise from hallucinations to perception generally, i.e. we can't use hallucinations to argue that we always perceive sense data. Just because they seem similar subjectively doesn't mean the same thing is going on. Hallucination and perception are different types of mental state, because in hallucination, the person isn't connected up to the world.
However, they can compare cases of hallucination with thoughts about objects that don't exist. For example, I can think that unicorns are white, but unicorns don't exist. What I do think is white when I think a unicorn is white. Just a unicorn, which doesn't exist. Suppose now I hallucinate seeing a white unicorn. What I have seen is that it's white. Again, just a unicorn. There is no physical object that looks white or it looks like a unicorn. In this hallucination, whatever explains how unicorns can be white without existing will also explain hallucinations or white unicorns.
Direct realists claim that we perceive the world directly, not via sense data. It doesn't understand sense experiences as mental things. Of course, in perceiving the world, we experience it. But shouldn't we say that perceiving the world is a virtue of perceiving sense data? Direct realists claim that we perceive the world directly, not via sense data. It doesn't understand sense experiences as mental things. Of course, in perceiving the world, we experience it. But shouldn't we say that we perceive the world in virtue of perceiving sense data?
If we immediately perceive sense data, we should be able to describe them in themselves as colour patches without using concepts that refer to physical objects, but we can't. We can't make off the sense data without relying on physical objects, so we can't use sense data to explain our experience of physical objects.
Suppose you explain your perception of the physical objects you see in terms of sense data. You then need to depend account of sense data as experiences. But this is what you can't have. You can't describe sense data without referring to physical objects. What we experience are physical objects, not sense data.